Hello, everybody, and welcome back to the Drive Pink Dialogue. It is episode number 36. As always, I'm your host, Scotty. I'm here with my co-host, Saur, and tonight we are talking a little bit about that Atlanta United game and a lot more about some of the fun things around Inter Miami. Unfortunately, that was a little bit of a lie. We'll be talking a lot about that Atlanta game and some of the other fun things about Inter Miami with a few minutes in the beginning. But before all of that, I'm here with my co-host, Saur. How are you feeling tonight, man?
I'm feeling good, man. I've had a long week at work, so I can't wait to vent out my frustrations and, just talk into Miami. Obviously, it's been a quiet week for us. We haven't played midweek. We're going to have a game this weekend, so we're going to talk about that, how our unbeaten streak is still going. Oh, wait, none of that's happening, right? We lost this week, so it's going to be a long, long conversation tonight, guys, so strap in.
Let's talk about some other things before we get into that game last night, because there are some things going around Inter Miami's world that I think are interesting and maybe we should touch on. There's a lot of reporting and news and bits going on about Angel Di Maria. We got a report a couple days ago about this idea that he's going to go play for the rest of the 2024 season at his childhood club in Argentina, Rosario Central, and then sign with Inter Miami in January. And then even in the last couple of days, we've gotten some updated reporting that he might even join Inter Miami this summer. I don't think we've talked about this yet, and so I guess I want to hear your thoughts when I say the name Angel Di Maria and put it in a sentence with Inter Miami.
How can I say this without discounting the player Angel Di Maria is and how valuable he's been to Argentina and to Real Madrid and to PSG? We don't need him. We've got Robert Taylor. We don't need Angel Di Maria. I know it's another Galactico signing, another big name, a celebrity that we're going to get in. But I think we've got enough big names and big hitters on this squad. Yes, Luis Suarez might leave next year. Then bringing in Angel Di Maria doesn't really, add much because he's not a striker as such. He's going to replace potentially Robert Taylor. I'm not sure whether Robert Taylor and Di Maria fit in the squad at the same time. And yeah, it feels like we're adding way too many players who might be past their prime. That being said, he's going to be a valuable addition to this squad, and he's potentially going to, have a good stake in the MLS. He's going to have a really good impact on the team, but long-term thinking, I don't think we need him.
You're such a curmudgeon, man. Don't you want to have fun with all the superstars? I mean, come on.
I mean, we had all our superstars on the pitch yesterday, and we performed much better when all of them were sitting out. What do you mean?
The only problem with last night is we didn't have enough superstars on the field. You got to add one more before we can break down a low block. No, but let me ask you a question. Is this team better with Jordi Alba or not? Overall.
Yeah.
Okay. Is this team better with Sergio Busquets overall or not?
Yeah.
Is this team better with Luis Suárez overall or not?
I would say so.
Same thing with Lionel Messi.
Maybe not.
No, okay. So
yeah.
This is the type of player Angel Di Maria would be. He would make the team better, and if it makes sense financially and roster-wise. And of course, in the MLS, you always have to consider how adding players, especially high-profile players, especially players on big contracts, affects what else you can do in the roster. And so that's a consideration. But if it's possible to bring him in, I think it's something you kind of just have to do. And especially because I don't know if there's been this huge indication that he's going to fill up a DP spot or anything. Of course, that's remains to be seen. But I thought we should talk about it because it has been reported over the last couple of days, and not just from one source, but from a couple.
I will say this though before we move on, that I think Angel Di Maria is 100% going to upgrade the squad. Right? He's potentially better than any other attacking option that we have in his position. He's going to have a phenomenal impact. But I'm a certain romantic when it comes to football. And for me, winning with our own homegrown players, winning with, I don't want to say kids because they're not all kids, but I don't want to be called out. If I'm into Miami, I don't want to be called out for buying our success. So it's going to be a whole different conversation if we win with the current squad. If we don't win with the current squad and then we go out and buy Angel Di Maria and then get maybe another couple of superstars like Nacho or somebody, then it just seems like we're potentially buying our way to success. Just a fruit for thought there.
Hey, let's have some success before we worry about whether we bought it or not. Okay, this Inter Miami club has not had a ton of trophies or winning seasons in their entire history. So let's just enjoy these types of things before we worry about how it makes us look historically. And you think about the last few MLS Cup champions. There's not a lot that didn't have some high-profile, high-priced players. And also, I think anyone that looks beyond those first 4 or 5 players realizes that there's a lot of young, high-quality players and great scouts or great scouting finds and so on and so forth. So, yeah, I think we can defend against that one relatively easily. Benjamin Kramaski, and we could just touch on this for a second, got called up to the U.S. Youth National Team Olympic preliminary friendly camp, which is coming up in the next 2 weeks. He'll leave after Saturday's game, and he'll be back by the next game. So he's not going to miss any games with Inter Miami. But this is basically the final roster before the final roster for that tournament. It's 26 guys, and it's going to get cut down to 18. I believe there's 6 midfielders, and that's going to get cut down to 4 or 5, or maybe it's 7, I think, and it's going to get cut down to 5. So he's not on the team yet, but he's still in contention, and I think has a solid chance to be on that roster, especially considering what the coach is seemingly looking for. But yeah, he's not going to miss any games, so I don't think an Inter Miami fan should worry too much about it.
Yeah, I would love to see him go out play for the U.S. men's national team, youth national team, and play in the Olympics. It's going to be great for him.
Yeah, and then lastly, Leo Campana and Sergio Christoph, 2 guys that are not going to be called up to the Copa America /Euros. Christoph had a funny comment over the last 36 hours where he was like, the coach in Ukraine isn't able to watch my games, so that's why he's not calling me up. Which,
wait, was he being serious or was he being sarcastic?
Who knows? But yeah, I thought that was funny. And then same with Campana. I don't think there was any reason to really be worried about Campana being called up. They have, Ecuador is having a little bit of a golden generation right now. And while Campana's sort of around the fringes, he's not really in the picture for them when everyone's healthy, not yet in his career. So confirmation that neither of those guys are going to be gone. And so it really looks like it's just going to be for this Copa America and Euros. It's just going to be Messi and Suárez. So pretty good news in terms of the guys we're going to have this summer.
Yeah, imagine losing Christoph and Campana and Suárez, basically no striker, and losing our only recognized senior centre-back wouldn't have boded well for the next few games that we're supposed to play. But good to know that we're going to have that backup.
Yeah, and Campana's going to be here, and I think he's going to have a chance to make a really big impact. I think this is going to be his a big run for him, and so it's important that he's going to be here. Let's get into it. This is the starting lineup from last night, and I apologize for the Twitter handle there. The back 4 that we had against Vancouver, but Busquets walks back into the starting lineup, Messi back in the lineup, Suárez back in the lineup, Redondo comes in for Benjamin Kramaski, and so quite a few changes from Saturday night's victory at Vancouver. And I don't know how well they played. We didn't get you on the pregame show last night, and so I guess I just want to hear what your thoughts are on this lineup, having a chance to digest what happened.
Can I just say, I got the pregame lineup correct, 100% bang on, and I got the scoreline correct. I just predicted the wrong winner. So I would call that pretty much a win, right? I knew this was going to be the case. I didn't want it. I was terrified of this midfield, but I knew that Tata, being Tata Martino, is going to pick this midfield. If I would have done the circle of the game yesterday, my biggest circle would be around that midfield, all three of them. I say that with the benefit of hindsight, of course, and we'll elaborate on this in a little bit. But the back line picks itself. We can't really do much without, we don't have too many options in the centre back role. The front three pick themselves. So Tata Martino's sole responsibility was to pick a midfield that can potentially win us the game. We'll find out if he succeeded or not.
By the way, I just want to shout out Daniel Solana for joining us last night and helping make that pregame show a lot of fun. He kind of came on last minute, and so I really do appreciate him coming on. And with that said, let's roast his decisions because he thought Sergei Christoph was the circle the lineup game. I think the reasons make sense. There was a chance that we were going to hit in transition, and Christoph is not an excellent transition player. But with that said, I think the biggest weakness was, like you said, in the midfield. And it was just a matter of whether this midfield could hold up defensively, and especially in transition. And we'll talk about why that is. Yeah, apparently he hates Ukrainians. But yeah, I agree with you. I think the back line picked itself, the front line picked itself. And so there's just a glut of talented midfielders, and this didn't have to be the three that he went with, but it is a three he went with, and maybe it's not that big of a surprise, but it didn't seemingly work out well. Another thing I just wanted to mention, because I think it is relevant to this conversation, Yannick Bright, who started Saturday night as a 6, was not available at the bench. So I don't know if he was injured but he wasn't available last night to start or come off the bench. And I do think when we try and think about how this midfield could work, that's important to note, because I think he's one of the pieces that really gives you a lot of flexibility, and he wasn't there last night. Anything else about this before we sort of jump into the big moments?
No, there's a lot of analysis to get into, so we should probably move on to that. But before that, I just want to again thank Danny for coming on, and this was our first guest on our podcast, guys, so that was a big deal, and we couldn't have asked for a better guest. Hopefully next time when we get him on, I will also be on to just discuss all things Inter Miami, because it was a great conversation yesterday.
Yeah, Inter Miami seemed to come out a little bit hot. We've seen this over the last couple of weeks. They had a nice stretch of like 4 or 5 games where they were really slow to start, but then picked it up after about 20 minutes. And they've sort of flipped the script over the last couple games where they come out really hot in the first 5 to 10 minutes and create a few chances, but not be able to score and then settle into a drawn-out game that seemingly they do win every time. So it hasn't really been a problem. The only real note I mentioned in that first part of the game was in the 16th minute. Lionel Messi had a really nice ball over the top to Jordi Alba, and Alba had space to put a cross into Suárez for a tap-in, but Alba couldn't quite control it. He just had a little bit of a heavy touch into the defender, and the chance was gone. But I think that play, and I don't know if you remember this specific one I'm talking about, but I think it was characteristic of the problems that attack had most of the game, where it felt like a lot of the touches were just a little too heavy, or the passes were just a little bit off angled and to the defender, or just things weren't quite coming off for those front, everyone that was in the final third. And I thought Alba, Suárez, Messi were all victims of not quite being at their best and sort of playing into a few problems when we're used to just having them play around everyone. But, just jumping forward to the 44th minute, that's when Saba Lobjanidze scores the first goal. It was coming for them, I think. They had a lot of opportunities in transition, and finally they get one to drop. It was a really nice goal from outside the box in transition. Midfielder's nowhere to be found. Busquets, I guess, was trailing him, but 5 or 6 yards behind the play, and neither of the center backs stepped up. I do think it was Tota Aviles' responsibility to step up and make that more difficult, but a nice shot, nevertheless, and nothing really Calendar could have done on that one. And Atlanta goes up 1-0 just before halftime.
Yeah, that was a fantastic goal, and I think well deserved for Atlanta because they were dangerous on the. Oh, thank you. I do have an extremely clean kitchen. I love to keep my house clean, but they were very dangerous on transition. Every time they had the ball, when we lost in the final third, they were literally running at us, and you could see the panic in our defense because it felt like we were constantly just looking back and running with them rather than defending them. So very, very weird first half for me because you could clearly see the gaps in the midfield. You could clearly see the issues. The transitions were really, really affecting us as a team. But somehow Atlanta wasn't capitalizing on it. And I thought this would be one of those games where we're going to potentially ride out the storm in the first half, change things up in the second half, and then, get that victory. The other aspect was I don't think we were too bad in the final third. However, you're completely right. As soon as we got to that penalty box, things started to fall apart. The ball was slightly short. Someone wasn't, making the right run. It just felt a little bit off. It felt a little bit, all over the place towards the end. I also thought there were a lot of attackers for us. That might be the case because we may have underestimated Atlanta and the threat that they actually pose in transitions. Because there was a time when I think I saw Redondo, Busquets, and Gressel, all three on the edge of the box, with I think Gressel sitting a little bit further back. But then nobody in between the defense and that entire space in behind. So as soon as we lose the ball, they just run back in. That was the story of the first half. I was hoping we would go into the second half scoreless and still 0-0. But they got one back through a beautiful, beautiful goal. And Lobzanice scored a very, very good goal. I'm going to struggle to pronounce that name for the rest of the podcast.
I feel like every time I say Lobzanice, I'm like mumbling, but also I'm trying to enunciate. And I don't know if it's actually coming off or not. But it was the story of not just the first half, but the whole game. Our midfield was virtually non-existent. I don't think at any point they really had control over the game. And so whenever Atlanta did get out and get in transition, they had a lot of space to do so. And they have quality players that made us pay. And, like we got here, Thiago Almada was one of those guys who had a really good game for them. And that happens, I guess, when you are facing good quality players like that. Going into the second half, we don't make any changes, and it showed the game was very similar. Tata finally does make a change, I think, in the 57th minute. Julian Gressel comes out, Matías Rojas comes in. We can talk about the substitutions, but I thought I was fine with that change. And yet 2 minutes later, we get hit on the counter again. 59th minute, another one from Lobzanice with a second goal. It's sort of a curler around Drake Calendar. Christoph gets pulled out wide because of the runner going wide. And so Alba, who's sort of trailing, is sort of forced to step into that central role. And he doesn't really put any pressure on Lobzanice. And so from outside the box, a nice curler from Lobzanice, and it's 2-0. And now suddenly I think, okay, we're in trouble.
Yeah, it felt like they were scoring only bangers at this point, and worst times to concede a goal as well, because we concede right at the end of the first half, and then we concede a little bit at the start of the second half. And I wasn't too sure about the substitutions. I thought if he was I would 100% have brought on Matías Rojas on, but I don't know if I would have brought him on for Gressel. We'll talk about Tata's substitutions and we'll spend a whole section talking about it. But for me, I think the second half was more of the same. The gaps were still the issue. And Atlanta, if I think about it, they didn't have too much of intricate play as such. It was very simple football. They were finding the spaces, attacking the spaces, running at us. And I think this was the first time where I saw this team suffer a little bit since maybe that LA Galaxy game where we were always on the back foot, running away from the ball as the opposition is driving at us. Because I remember Ricky Puig and Painter running at us in that first half against LA Galaxy, and we did concede the first half as well there. So this seemed like the first time that was happening, and I'm not sure if I blame that on the defense entirely. Yes, they were sitting quite far back, but it was pure counter-attacking football. There was not much that we had, in terms of personnel available to deal with it on the pitch, and it showed, and they just capitalized by scoring some really good goals.
Yeah, or at least I've been complimentary of this team over the past couple games because I did feel like they've made some improvements in transition. I felt like the defense had really been stout and been stepping into shooting lanes and getting a lot of blocks and clearances and making it difficult for opposing teams to score. And that wasn't the case in this game, so that was disappointing. And I thought that was a team effort, not just on the defense. So it was disappointing to see, but let's have a little conversation about the substitutes right now because I don't really know what Tata Martino could have done. They're down 1-0 at this point when he makes that sub, and so you don't have a defensive replacement really to bring in that you think is going to make you better defensively. What you need is a goal to get you back in the game. So I understand taking off Julian Gressel from Matthias Rojas to reshape the midfield, but I don't think either Busquets or Federico Redondo got the message that Matthias Rojas is the 10 and you two are holding midfielders now. And you have the responsibility of playing back and guarding in transition. And yeah, I just think structurally it never made sense in terms of defending transition, but it does make sense in terms of trying to get a goal, which I think at that point was Tata's really only play because you don't have a defensive midfielder to come in. You don't have you're not going to replace one of the center backs for anything that happened. So, but listen, I can understand in retrospect why people wanted Kramaski, why people wanted maybe David Ruiz to come in, but I don't think they really solve your problem of needing a goal, even if they do make you a little bit fiercer defensively.
Yeah, at this point, I think I would have been a little bit brave because you have lack of substitute options. Let's be honest. Let's give Tata a little bit of benefit of doubt because if you want to shore up and maybe unlock Redondo and Sergio Busquets, the best way you do that is by putting in a single pivot six, a destroyer in there. Yannick Bright, who's the only person who can fit that mold, is not available to you. So the only solution then you have is to try and get something out of this midfield is to put on more attacking options in there, but you have to balance that out. So for me, I would have definitely brought on Matthias Rojas. I think he brought him on at the right time, but I would have actually switched him out for Robert Taylor because I don't think Robert Taylor had a very effective game. I don't think he was, for me, I thought he was quite invisible throughout the game. So I would have brought him on there, and I would have put David Ruiz in for Gressel. That gives a little bit of dynamism in the midfield and a little bit of more, if not defensive power, at least we have more athleticism for someone to be able to track back. And then Ruiz can potentially get involved some way in the final third if need be. But that's maybe being a little bit too picky or being a little bit too creative about it, and maybe that was a little bit of a Hail Mary at 1-0. So I understand why Tata did what he did and completely, justified substitutions. But when the game is going so different, I think it's easier said in hindsight, but I would prefer Tata to be a little bit more creative and a little bit more bold. Maybe take Suárez off, put Campana on. That automatically adds a level of pressure up top that allows your midfield to then get back in position when they're transitioning on the counter. So you got to recognize when some players are not having good games.
Yeah, and listen, I hear what you're saying in hindsight, and I also think there's definitely a conversation about Redondo because he was gassed at one point and he wasn't very effective in the second half at all. And so, but again, think about what we're talking about: taking Luis Suarez off and taking Robert Taylor off when you need a goal. Like, you can understand why that wasn't the decision to be made at the time.
For sure.
So again, in hindsight, I think there's a little bit of differences, but you can definitely understand the decision making. Just to move,
I have
back.
Sorry, I have an award on Redondo, because I did an entire study on him these last 20 minutes before the game started, and I want to see if you saw the same thing. I do agree with you; he was a bit unfit, and he should not have played the 90 minutes. But I have a more nuanced conversation that I'd like to have about him. So let's keep that for the awards.
Okay, well, I might steal that. I might steal him before you get a chance to give him the award.
Please don't.
Okay, so moving forward, just a couple minutes later, Lionel Messi does get the one goal back. It is a nice shot from outside the box. A little dump off from Busquets, who gets credited with the assist, but it's really Messi with a blade cutter from 24 yards out, maybe to the opposite corner. Really, really a nice shot, actually. Nothing that Josh Cohen could do about it. But still, it came immediately, so I felt maybe okay, the team woke up and we're ready to go, and so now we can get things going. And maybe this game we needed to give up 2 goals before we could win, and not just 1. But I still didn't feel like we changed anything in terms of how we were going to protect ourselves against Atlanta to make me feel like this game was ours to win or anything like that.
Yeah, and that goal honestly came out of nothing. It didn't feel like we were ever going to threaten that goal. It just felt like we were trying things that weren't working, and then Messi did a Messi thing and squeezed the ball in through multiple bodies and managed to get it into the back of the net. But even that, I felt a bit deflated watching this team yesterday, and it didn't seem like a lot of these players had a long week's rest. It felt like they'd literally played a game the day before, because it was all a little bit lethargic, a little bit slow, always running away from the ball, always being one step behind and reactive rather than proactive. The positioning was all over the place. And listen, when you're 2-0 down, everyone's trying to get in there to try and contribute to get a goal. So the structure just goes for a toss, and that's completely understandable. But even at times when we were trying to attack, the patterns just weren't clicking. So for me, I think that goal came at a good time. Maybe it could have pushed us in the right direction, but it was more like something out of nothing rather than a sustained pressure from our end.
Yeah, I agree. And then the final goal and really the nail in the coffin comes in the 73rd minute. It's a nice play from Thiago Almada to break to the center, create a little bit of space for Caleb Wiley on the overlap wide, and then he puts it into the center for Tiare to tap it in, finish it off, and really to finish Inter Miami off. They go down 3-1, and like you said, they never really seemed like they were particularly threatening for the rest of the game. Final score 3-1. Any other moments from this game that you think were worth mentioning that were, a chance for Inter Miami to get back into it? I know Atlanta had a number of chances really to make this even worse, but I'd be happy to skip over those.
No, it was just one of those games. It was a game where the Goliath was absolutely decimated by David. So not too many comments there.
This Atlanta United team is not as bad as maybe we made them out to be going into the game.
Yes, guys, blame Scotty and Danny for their analysis of Atlanta.
A lot of their games over the last this winless streak were 1-goal games, a lot of draws, a lot of 1-goal losses. In fact, all of them were 1-goal losses or a draw. So they were at least competitive in most of their games, and I think we should have given them a little bit more credit for that. And I thought they came out really interesting in this game. We talked about in the pregame show how they're likely to play in a low block, but they come out for the first 10, 15 minutes really pressing high, trying to be aggressive. And I think that does do an interesting, thing mentally where it makes you as a player on the team, on the field, feel like you're starting to understand what they're doing. And then when they change it up, your game plan to beat them all of a sudden has to change, not at minute 5, but at minute 25 when you're trying to, already make plans on how to win the game. And it is a little bit more difficult. And then also they went with a back 3, back 5, back 3. And that was not something they had done at any point recently. And so I think there's a couple of wrinkles that Atlanta showed that Inter Miami just wasn't prepared for.
Yeah, and they had that 4-man midfield that we had absolutely no answer to. Forgive me, I'm going to butcher the name again. Lobjanidze was an absolute weapon on that transition, constantly running at us with the ball. I think Thiago Almada was potentially their man of the match if, Lobjanidze hadn't scored those 2 absolute bangers. I thought Muyumba had a really good game. McCarthy was decent. Caleb Wiley, I think, had a really good game. And the 4-man midfield was, I think, used very, very effectively against us. coupled with the fact that we got our midfield combination wrong, it completely elevated their play style and their formation. And as much as they were really set up for success, we allowed them to be able to set up for success, and we didn't interpret this midfield setup from them. So it just felt like they had a really good game plan and we had a really bad game plan, and that's why there was such a massive divide in between all that was happening.
Yeah, you mentioned their midfield four, and I think it's really fun to think about the qualities they have from that four, where you have Mayumba, who's a really good six. I think he's underrated in this league and can really win balls and get out of trouble. Dax McCarty, who I think did a really good job of helping them play out of pressure, which they did tremendously well in this game. And, he's a veteran that's really good on the ball, and he got them out of situations a lot. And so did Mayumba. And then Thiago Almada, the ball carrier forward, and then Lobjanidze, the attacking presence that'll run with the ball and try and take on the defense. All four of them, I think, complemented each other really well in this game, and particularly the three non-goal scorers in Almada, Mayumba, and Dax McCarty. I thought they did really, really good job of every time they were in a sticky situation, playing out of it beautifully. They didn't turn the ball over in bad situations, even though that's what Inter Miami was trying to do a lot of the time. That midfield, and we'll talk about it, but the midfield played really high, and they let the back line go on islands. And they did that in order to try and create those high turnovers. We saw that a lot with Diego Gomez, and he would get the turnovers. In this game, Atlanta took care of the ball, played out of it, and then got on the break so many times. It was frustrating, and it did feel like that was how Inter Miami was going to break down that defense, maybe, is by creating those high turnovers. But Atlanta, like I've said a couple times now, they did a tremendous job of just not letting that happen. And so I want to give them a lot of credit because they haven't shown that a lot, and it played perfectly in this game.
To your credit and your analysis yesterday, I would have potentially had the same analysis about Atlanta. I would not have expected them to come out and play this well or beat us 3-1, and quite comprehensively at that. So kudos to them for finding the right formula to beat us, and it just worked out in their favor that we didn't have our game plan on target yesterday. I will also say that there was a certain compound effect to us not creating chances in the final third or being a little bit sloppy in the final third, because I thought we were winning the ball up a little bit. Redondo did get a few good interceptions. I believe Busquets had a couple here and there as well. We were winning the ball high up a few times, especially in that first half, where I thought it looked good. But then we didn't do anything with it, and we almost immediately gave it back. So it almost felt like we were, getting it and then giving it back without actually having any sort of sustained pressure in that final third. And when you don't consistently create dangerous chances, and when there are like loose balls in the final third with no cover in behind you, all the team needs to do is get the ball in space, and then if you have runners in behind, you're just going to be able to make the most of that absolute chasm at the back that you have. So I think that was another compound effect of our attackers not being in full form yesterday.
Yeah. Gonzalo Pineda is a coach that, there was a chance that we got him fired last night, and now he's back in the driver's seat, ready to compete in the East. And, I mentioned in the pregame, go ahead.
We helped a man keep his job. Inter Miami is a charitable organization, okay?
I mentioned in the pregame show that they were sort of teetering between below average and embarrassing, and in terms of where they were in the table and their points total. And I think they went from below average to like kind of right there with the average teams, with just one performance.
They swung the saw yesterday. They swung the saw.
I think there's a chance that this team goes on a nice little run and is a little bit more competitive than we thought they would be.
Guys, now that Scotty and I have complimented them, watch them lose every single game hereafter.
Well, they have built their team around Thiago Almada and Yakumakis as their number 9. But I actually liked what they had without Yakumakis yesterday because they're a little bit more athletic and they simplify things and they give Almada the ball in space and transition instead of trying to be a team that plays in the final third. And I do think that there's a way to be really effective. I also think that that 3-4-3, or I thought it was more like a 3-4-2-1, but I thought that was really good for them too. And their defense played really well. Derek Williams and Gregerson had good games, and so I think they might have found something. Although they'll probably put their goalkeeper back in and ruin everything. But yeah, I actually thought they looked good, and maybe Josh Cohen was the good luck charm for them.
Yeah, I mean, again, they look good, and I 100% agree with that. But I don't know how much of it is Inter Miami making them look good, or were they actually really good? And if it turns out that there's a certain style that you can play against this Inter Miami team, and I was confident of the fact that over the last few games we were getting over those vulnerabilities, and you alluded to the fact that our defense has been a lot more stout. We've been a lot more stable in our defensive shape, in transitions, and it just felt like a throwback for a little bit. It felt like we reverted back to our bad ways. Enough of that. Let's move on to our next section.
Well, it's a perfect transition because let's talk about what Inter Miami did wrong and leave what Atlanta did right in the past. In the beginning of the season, in the preseason, the first couple of games of the year, we talked about Sergio Busquets turning the ball over, us having no one to defend in the midfield, us giving up easy transition opportunities, us putting our defense on an island, our fullbacks getting too high up and giving our center backs no chance. And it did, and our midfield balance being off. And there's so many things that were reminiscent of the first couple games of the season, of the preseason, that kind of came back to haunt us. To me, this game felt the most like that game in Saudi Arabia where we lost 6-1 or 6-0. I don't even remember what the final score was, but we just gave them so many opportunities in transition. And listen, that team had more quality than Atlanta last night, but it felt like we could have lost this game 6-1 if we were playing a better team, because we were so open. There was so much space in the midfield, and Atlanta didn't do anything particularly crazy to create it. They just took advantage of what we gave them.
Yeah, and it's really comical if you think about it, that this same team, or maybe not the same team, but this Inter Miami squad had this resolute defense against Vancouver where we were absolutely stunning in all aspects of the game. And then we go and put on a game like that and a performance like that. Man, I could fit a planet in that midfield. Honestly, there was that much space. But yeah, I'm not sure what the idea was from Tata Martino here, because either these were instructions or the players just weren't following it. But it seemed like we had a plan to go full throttle attack from the very get-go. This was a very attacking midfield, let's be honest, because Busquets is no longer that sole deep-lying playmaker. Redondo is also more of an 8 than a natural 6. I have an inkling that Martino wanted Redondo to play that 6th role, but that didn't work out. And then Gressel is just Gressel, right? He's going to Gressel. So yeah, it just felt like the midfield three. When I was thinking about this, and I was trying to think of awards for our later section, and the thought that came to my mind was, this seems like a Dr. Seuss poem where it's thing 1, thing 2, and thing 3. All 3 of them have basically similar qualities. They do basically the same thing, and there's absolutely no balance in the midfield. So it almost felt like all of them were trying to do the same thing, which is get involved in the attack. And by virtue of doing that, there was absolutely no defensive balance in that midfield, which left our defense so exposed, because they have this massive space in the middle, which Atlanta can just run into and accelerate into your defense through there. And it's hard when your opposition is running straight at you and you don't have players who are good at defending, transitions. And it just exposed us to all sorts of chaos.
Okay, Yes or no? This game was lost in the midfield.
Yeah, 100%. This game was not lost in defense.
Okay. I agree. And that was my biggest takeaway. They never controlled the midfield at any point in the entire game. And
Are people saying this game was lost in the defense? Because I didn't think so.
not our fans, because our fans know, no ball. But you see some things on Twitter, people blaming Calendar, people blaming the center backs. This was the midfield. At no point did I think they ever had control of the game. And I think it's frustrating because that's how you win and lose games. This team, and I want to give Busquets a little bit of credit because I have been asking for him to play higher up the pitch when we're going up against a low block, because I do think he's that elite technical type player that can help break it down. And we've seen him do it a little bit against the New England Revolution. He and Messi had a beautiful goal. But then it's like you said, there needs to be someone back there to be a real six. And I agree with you. I think that in Tata's mind, it was Federico Redondo. And in Federico Redondo's mind, he was playing as the number 10. And he was trying to make the game happen. And Gressel, is going to Gressel. And all three of them were playing inside the final third almost the entire game. And even when they did turn the ball over, they were trying to create turnovers in that area. They weren't getting back immediately. And it was once Atlanta played back, they were scrambling. And of course, they were getting beat for pace by a pretty pacey Atlanta United team. And it was bad. And, it's like you said, there's a lot of similar attributes from the midfielders on our team. And so one of the biggest challenges for Tata Martino is to get the midfield right on a game by game basis, because he's got a lot of options, but they don't all complement each other perfectly. And this trio definitely doesn't complement each other. Too slow, too attack minded. And Redondo was struggling for energy, I think, in the second half.
And that's given. This is the first 90 minutes he's playing. I don't know why he's playing 90 minutes, first of all. And I remember saying in our post-match after the Vancouver game that I would actually prefer him to come off the bench, because I think he still needs to get back into match fitness. He's barely played any minutes in the last few weeks. So for me, Tata needs to check himself, man. Just protect the players a little bit. I will say, though, one qualm or one criticism of the defense that I may have, and it's not even a criticism, but what they were doing was, when the midfield is so high up, you would essentially push your defenders high up as well, and then hope that in transition you defend one-on-one really well so that they're not able to get in behind you, or just beat them for pace. That's what you would normally do. So you play a high line up throughout so that there's no gap in between your lines. We don't have the personnel to be able to play that high up, especially with Christoph coming in.
And listen, no team in MLS does. This is not
exactly.
This is an MLS thing. It's not like stylistically, you can do that in the Premier League or in the Bundesliga, but it just doesn't exist in the MLS.
100%. And by virtue of the opposition being so good in transition and having seen that they're beating us in transition, the defense just sat back, and they should have sat back. Like, that's completely fine. But what that did was that increased the distance in the midfield, and it just left an entire area for Atlanta to play in, which was why this game went as bad as it did.
Do you think Kramaski makes a big difference in this game if he comes on? Because I don't, honestly.
I think he makes some difference. He adds an element that we could potentially, come back with, but I don't think he would have been the game changer, because he is also a very attack-minded individual. Yes, he comes back in defense.
Let me rephrase that. I do think he would have helped us defensively, but again, we were making substitutions. We were going for goals, and I don't think Kramaski would have been particularly effective in this game, because he's a guy that's going to excel in transition. He's going to excel when there's space, because he's really good at finding those spaces, and he's really good at passing the ball into spaces. And going up against a low block, I just don't think that's his game. So I can understand, again, why Tata may have elected to stick with Redondo, just because he probably felt that there might be a little bit of technical prowess that Redondo has that might have gotten him the goal, even though he was exhausted. But by that point, you needed the goal. I just saw this comment. I just want to mention real quick. Yes, it's true, Wrestling Media, that David De Gea or Keylor Navas may have saved one or both of those goals, but those are two of the 10 best shot-stopping goalkeepers in the entire world. And if they want to join Inter Miami for the contract that Drake Callender has, I will gladly take both of them and put Drake Callender on the bench. But that's not a shot at Drake Callender that he didn't save those goals or that he's not a world-class shot stopper at this point.
He couldn't have done anything for that first goal. This third goal was a deflection off of Jordi Alba.
I don't think he could have done any of them.
Maybe you can say that he could have potentially saved the second goal, but you're just being too critical at that point. And
I think it got a little deflected too.
Yeah, it's just, you're scrutinizing it a little bit too much. But yeah, I agree. De Gea and Navas would have saved that, but unfortunately, they don't play for us.
Maybe. Yeah, back to it. Moving forward, we have all these guys in a midfield, but a lot of them are 8 profiles. And really the only 2 that can play in the midfield that we've seen so far that are different are Matthias Rojas and Yannick Bright. And so that's why I thought the Rojas in the midfield decision actually made the most sense, because he's the only substitution that Tata could have made in this game that fundamentally transforms what your midfield is. If you replace either Gressel or Redondo with David Ruiz or Kramaski, you're still playing the same structure of midfield that clearly wasn't working, that clearly wasn't controlling the game. And so bringing in Matthias Rojas does fundamentally change it. It didn't work, but you can't necessarily judge people on the results as much as the process and the thinking. And there's no Yannick Bright in this game. Assuming Yannick Bright's not going to be a locked-in starter, which of course he's not going to be, how do we fix this going forward so that our midfield can be both well-structured but also still effective going forward? And to just control the game and not give up all these spaces and all that.
I think Gressel and Redondo need to be the dual pivot, because neither of them are really good defensively, and then they don't add the level of attacking incision that Sergio Busquets does. So for me, I think Busquets needs to play as the 8, and then they need to play as the dual pivot 6s. This sounds weird, but that's the only way you balance this midfield out. Redondo has a really good passing range. I think in this game he was really good on the ball, but off the ball he left a lot to be desired. Gressel is he's Gressling, so Gressel will Gressel. And then, for me, I think if you want to go with this particular midfield, you got to put Sergio Busquets high up, let him be the one responsible for linking up with Messi, and then put Redondo maybe a little bit further back, and then Gressel even further back. Because we've seen when Gressel sits back a little bit, he's able to add that level of transition defense, add that level of buffer to defend transitions in that play. So that's potentially how I would solve that issue. Another way I would solve that issue is just not play this midfield.
Yeah, and this is something that I think is guaranteed for Saturday. We can't play the same trio in the midfield at all. Tata's going to play this trio again, because they're 3 of the highest paid and most, we've poured the most resources into these 3. But it can't be Saturday, because this trio needs some time on the pitch to build that chemistry and understanding of where they need to be. Here's my question to you, because I think this might be the answer, is just, does Federico Redondo need to understand what his role is? Because
for sure.
When we bought him, we were like, this guy's a 6. He's going to be the partner that protects Busquets. He's going to be a true defensive mid. And yes, he's got the technical ability to be a phenomenal player, but he's a 6. And that hasn't really been the case since he got here. And maybe we didn't talk about this enough in his first 4 games when he first got here. But now, when we don't have Diego Gomez, and in this particular game we didn't have a Nico Freire or that defensive bite that you would feel comfortable with, he really felt like he was struggling to, even if he was in the game, struggling to impact the game constructively.
Listen, I don't want to be too critical of Federico Redondo. For me, this guy's just come back from injury. He played 4 games for us. That's not a lot at all.
I don't mean to like criticize him. It's more of a
Yeah,
like, is this just a matter of him figuring out where he needs to be, and
and
so
I'm
that
putting
we
this
should
this
naturally expect it to get better?
yeah, and I'm gonna put this in a little bit of perspective in that sense, because when he first in his first game, I think in his first start, um, we were a little bit skeptical about his ability to play as a 6. I think he got better over the next 3 games. I think he positioned himself a lot better. He understood how to play next to Busquets, and that's when we started to go on this run of winning games with that midfield. Obviously, we had Diego Gomez back in there at that time, but I think if you slot in Benjamin Kramaski, it's basically a like for like midfield for that setup that we had with Redondo, Gomez, and Busquets. And I was going to ask you, like, the reason I think that was working and this wasn't working was because Gomez, Busquets, and Redondo were playing 3 different positions. In this game, Redondo, Busquets, and Grasso were playing the same position. So I completely agree with you. I think Redondo needs to eventually evolve, and Tata needs to coach it into him to make sure he plays that 6th row and sits back and distributes rather than gets involved in the final third, because that's not how we get the best utility out of him.
Let me also mention with Redondo, I don't know. Maybe we're misremembering that the defense wasn't good when he was there. Like it wasn't working well necessarily defensively when he got here. I think we love the tools and we can see the potential, and that's very exciting. But in the 4 games he started, we gave up 2 goals to Nashville. We gave up 3 goals to CF Montreal at home. We gave up 1 goal in Nashville. Those 2 Nashville games were the CONCACAF Champions Cup. And we almost gave up a 3rd goal to Nashville away. And then we had the 1 goal against DC United. So you're talking about 7 goals in 4 games. And I remember that DC United game was like wide open in the midfield, and we just got lucky to be the ones that took advantage of it. And then, against CF Montreal too, we weren't great defensively. So I do think that there's an aspect of him having to come to the realization that his role here is to be a defensive player, not a box-to-box 8 that gets forward and tries to make plays in the final third, because I don't think Inter Miami's going to be tremendous if he's doing that and we're starting him game in and game out.
And for me, I think he's a number 8. I don't think he's a number 6, which begs the question about what was our understanding of acquiring him. I do think he can play as a number 6. I'm not saying he can't. But for me, he ideally, or the best use of his abilities would be as a number 8. I think the idea is to coach him into a number 6, and that could work, but it's going to need some time. One question that I have for you is, our standard midfield over the last few games has been Grasso, Busquets, and Kramaski, which on paper is potentially as attacking as the one that we saw yesterday evening. So why has that been working so well, and why have we been better at transitions with that midfield compared to what we saw yesterday, or what our understanding of this midfield trio is?
I don't know if it has been better. Our back line has been significantly better defensively, but that's not what we got against Vancouver, right? Because we had Yannick Breit instead of Busquets. Against DC United, we pulled out a 1-0 victory at the death, but we were a lot more conservative. We didn't face this sort of bunker and counter team. And also, I think that the defensive, the back 5 have been really good lately in a way that, we gave them a lot of credit for. And we didn't rely so much on our midfield to help stop transitions. And then the other thing I think in this game particularly is Atlanta did again, phenomenal job of playing through us. And so they really put us on the back heel almost immediately every time they got a turnover. There was no turnover that turned into a turnover that gave us, you know what I mean? Like,
Yeah.
Yeah.
Things weren't just, the second balls weren't falling for us, and it just felt like, everything was going their way, which is to their credit. They played really well for that. I will say though, no matter who you put in that midfield, if all 3 of them are as high as Redondo, Grasso, and Busquets were yesterday, we're going to end up losing anyways. So it felt like maybe it was an instructional thing or what it was, because 2 of those midfielders are the same. There's just one difference here. And that shouldn't technically change the midfield that drastically and cause us that much of a space issue in the midfield. So I don't know. It's a lot to digest and to analyze, and hopefully in the next couple of games, if we stick with this midfield, we sort of figure out how to play.
I don't think Tata can go back with this midfield on Saturday. I think he's got to put Kramaski back in or Yannick Bright. And I also think Julian Gressel is going to get a break just for rest purposes because he started both these games. Although he did come out early this game, so maybe not. I don't know if you looked at any of the ratings websites between last night and now, but I thought they were hilariously bad. One of the things that they give a lot of credit to is like touches in the final third, completed passes in the final third, things that our midfielders would have gotten a lot of credit for, and Jordi Alba would have gotten a lot of credit for yesterday, but that actually were the Achilles heel for us going the other way. I thought it was really funny because our defenders had sort of bad ratings. Calendar got a bad rating, and yet a lot of our midfield and attackers got pretty high marks.
For me, I think Redondo played really well on the ball. He played equally worse off the ball. So that answers it.
Well, let's hold our Redondo conversation because I heard that there's a great award coming up for him. And anything else before we get into awards about this team or what we did right or wrong?
We haven't spoken about Tata Martino in terms of analyzing his substitutions and his starting 11. I think putting the players aside, this loss is entirely on him. He should have set up or given instructions that don't exploit that midfield the way Atlanta was. So for me, I think as great of a game he had against Vancouver, this was an absolute shit show. Excuse my language.
I don't know. I don't blame him too much for this game. I think that Atlanta came out with something entirely new, which they haven't done, which is that back 3/back 5. They've been a back 4 team all season. And so when that happens, it is a little tough for me to blame the coach for not setting up a team to succeed against that. And then when you talk about making his changes, I didn't think he had a ton of options that were appropriate.
Yeah, but you can make changes in two ways, right? You can change things structurally. Instruct Gressel to sit back. Tell him not to get that far forward.
No, I hear what you're saying. I'm not necessarily blaming Tata for not having a 6 in the game. I think that someone was supposed to be that and was like
and
not
someone
doing
was not
it.
playing it. Yeah, that makes
and that's
that
why
potentially makes sense.
That's why I ask about Redondo sort of growing into his role in this team, because whether it was Busquets or Redondo, the communication on who was supposed to play a bit farther back wasn't there, because there's no way that the idea is to just leave that much space between the midfield and the defense. There's no way Tata told them to do that, right? So yeah, and then the other thing that could have happened is maybe he wanted the defense to play way higher up, and they got beat for pace 1 or 2 times early, and they kind of lost their nerve, and so they sat back farther and farther, and then that's how the space was created. But
I will say this though, just talking about tactics.
Wait, hold on. But my last thing, I am happy to blame Tata for things like playing Busquets and Gressel together, but I've already talked about that so many times that it feels redundant.
We can't go on a rant.
I have the same complaints about Tata as I always do, but I don't think he was particularly bad in this game. And then as far as substitutions, I thought the Campana substitution made sense, getting another player that can attack the goal in a different way. And yes, again, in hindsight, I think there was probably a Ruiz or Kramaski for Redondo substitution to be made, but at the time you really need goals, and I can see why he thought Redondo might be better at breaking down a low block than either of those two players. So that's
I want to add one thing about tactics that I was
go ahead.
Thinking about. So I was watching Enzo Maresca's masterclass the other day, because he's the new Chelsea coach, and I saw a couple of his videos of his play style and stuff, and he was talking about inverted fullbacks, and one of the things that he mentioned was that the reason that coaches usually employ inverted fullbacks is to create that overload in the midfield, but also to defend in transitions, because that just adds that extra body in front of your two centre backs. Of course, it leaves you a little bit more vulnerable on the wings, but I wonder, maybe in this game, that might have been an option that we could have utilized by pushing Jordi Alba in that midfield role to try and then defend with a back three and have him sit as that number 6 to defend those transitions. So, yeah, it's just me trying to spitball and, think about ideas.
I'm thinking to myself of how Redondo or Busquets is like, you know what? No, I need to get forward more. And yet you're going to go tell Jordi Alba that he needs to sit back and play as a six.
Or Wiegand, then just push Wiegand in. So yeah, it's I want to put that out just as a food for thought.
I think with this team, it's going to be hard to play with inverted fullbacks, because Jordi Alba's greatest asset is to bomb down that left wing and to put crosses in, right? That's why he's a great player. And then Cello, the thing about Cello is that you create with Messi on the field so much space down that right side, because Messi draws so much attention towards the center from that right side, that you also want someone that can be a threat. And I know that Cello doesn't do that a ton, and that Gressel does like to get over there when he feels like he has the time and space and confidence, but still, I don't know with this team if that makes the most sense, but maybe we're going to see that type of thing. I think what's really interesting about not this weekend, but beyond this weekend, is we're going to get 5 or 6 games where we won't have Messi and Suarez. And so we'll have to retool this entire structure of our team to try and make it work. And you might be able to see a couple of those types of things, because, we have to find new ways to make this team work. Anything else?
No, all good. Just wanted to flaunt my ball knowledge there.
You watched a 20-minute video and now you're an expert on inverted fullbacks.
Of course, that's how it works, right?
No, listen, more than me. So let's get into awards, though. On this show, we give out 6 awards: the man of the match, the Miami man of the match, the heron that flew north, and then 2 individual awards each. And I am going to be coming up with mine on the spot, so I apologize for that. But this week, it is your turn to start. Good luck telling me who was Miami's man of the match.
I'm going to keep it simple. I'm going to give it to the person who scored the goal. Lionel Messi did not have the best game, but definitely provided us a chance to get back into it. I don't think there was any other player who was outstanding, and he may have sparked a comeback. Unfortunately, it wasn't to be. But for me, he was the only player that, did something of note in that game. And I'm going to use the cop-out card this time around and just say Lionel Messi gets the man of the match. I don't think anybody else deserved it.
Yeah, I didn't think he had a great game by Messi standards. I will say he had 2 plays.
SofaScore says he's got 7.5 rating. Okay, so he's got 7.5 rating.
Yeah, well, you get a lot of touches in the final third. You get a high score. I will say, though, in the second half, he had 2 moments where he slipped, and it felt like there was a combination play. I think both were with Suarez, where if he doesn't slip, he might get that pass back from Suarez and be in a really dangerous position. And then he slipped both times, and so it never really came to fruition, and Suarez had to try and make something out of it. But listen, he had a lot of he does this thing that only he does, where he kind of just like takes this little half touch past the defender and then just like wiggles past him, and it somehow goes right through the defender, even though the defender's standing right there. I don't even oftentimes understand how he does it, and yet he finds himself on the other side of the defender with the ball, and that wasn't coming off today. He had a few passes into that were turnovers that weren't great. I also thought he had a couple really nice passes early that the receiver kind of fumbled. And so, I think there's a chance that if things go a little bit better, he has an assist or 2 in this game, and we feel like he had a tremendous game. So I'm not hating on it. I didn't think there was a lot of tremendous performances in this game. Probably not who I would have given the man of the match to, but I do understand your reasoning. So good award. Our second award, and unfortunately it is mine to give, is the Heron That Flew North Award. This is our award for the player that was doing the wrong thing in this game. Florida Herons, they don't go anywhere for the winter, and they certainly don't go north. And so if you're flying north as a Inter Miami Heron, you're doing the wrong thing. I'll be honest, the guy I was going to give it to apparently has a really great award for next. So I will not give it to him. And instead, I will give it to to me, it's obviously him. So I'm a little struggling. I'm going to give it to Jordi Alba. He had a touch in the 6th minute where I thought he had I thought he was going to score a goal and or get an assist, and he kind of fumbled it. He had a couple fumbles. He didn't step up for the shot on the second goal. I see you laughing maniacally. I don't know why.
Because SofaScore rated him as the highest player on the team.
Really?
And that's why, ladies and gentlemen, you should never rely on SofaScore or any other stats that give you an idea of who's the best player on the pitch, because there's nothing like an eye test.
It's generally a solid, but not in this game.
That's just funny.
Yeah,
I'm sorry.
He should have stepped up on the second goal, and he didn't. And then I thought he had a few chances to make the game going forward, and he had a few fumbles. And so, yeah. And I also didn't think there was like a ton of individually poor performances. It was more like structurally bad. And so I think I'm going to give it to Jordi Alba and apologize because he wasn't my first choice.
Yeah, it's not too bad. I agree with you. I think he had a few. I think he was frustrated in this game as well. Again, he's just coming back from injury, so I don't want to harp on about it too much. But I'm going to say something very controversial here. I kind of miss Franco Negri a little bit for his defensive stability. I'm going to leave it at that because the comments are going to kill me. But yeah, Jordi Alba didn't have a great game, but that was for the whole defense as well.
Do you think we see Negri on Saturday?
I hope so.
Alba started both the Vancouver game and this game, went 90 minutes in both. And so I thought that there was a really good chance we saw Franco Negri in that Saturday game, regardless of how Alba did in this game, just because of, a little bit of rotation.
I don't know. We'll see, but I do miss his defensive stability. Obviously, Alba's still getting up to pace with things, and he's going to get into, 6th gear very soon. But in the meantime, it's good to reminisce.
Okay, let's hear your first individual award. What did you prepare that you've been bragging about for so long?
Nah, it's not okay, I'm going to call it the
Did I hype it up too much now?
I'm going to call it the GPS is broken award.
The GPS is broken award goes to Drake Callender, because if you ask the Twitter experts, he was responsible for all 3 goals, and his internal clock is broken.
Yeah, you're absolutely right.
or Federico Redondo, right?
All right, so this is what I wanted to talk about. Federico Redondo's GPS was completely broken in this game. And I say that because his positioning was god awful. Yes, he wasn't energetic towards the other, second half of the game. He faded away a little bit. Probably should have been brought off at the 60th, 65th minute. That can all be excused. He was good on the ball. I thought he had really good distribution. He was connecting well at times. But his positioning, oh my goodness. I watched those particular sections of that game a couple of times, and there was Sergio Busquets in the middle where he's supposed to be. Gresso is Gressling, but this time Gresso is Gressling in the right position.
We cannot make that a verb.
I'm sorry, I just did. And then there's Federico Redondo, who's literally sitting right next to Sergio Busquets, basically hugging him. And there's this entire area on the left side of the pitch, which is completely open. And it was absolutely hilarious to see, because all he had to do was switch on his GPS and just scoot a little bit to the other side, and that would have completely covered up all the space that was on that side that they were attacking from. So for me, that positioning aspect was really, really awful to see. I agree with you with the comment that you put up later. Exactly. He was everywhere but nowhere at the same time. He just didn't know where to be, which is odd. And that's something that now I'm going to keep an eye on, because positioning is not necessarily something that you coach. It's a little bit of IQ as well. And I thought he had a good IQ when we first watched him in the first 4 games. So I just hope this is a little bit of a blip and he had, a little bit of a brain fart because maybe he was tired, didn't necessarily understand where to position himself, still getting back into the game flow and game rhythm. But that positioning was really, really bad to see, because that shouldn't be happening, not at this level.
Yeah, one of the talking points I think that came out of this game for me is the difference in that spot's positioning between last weekend's Vancouver game and this game. We have both been glowingly bright about Mr. Yannick Bright because of that awareness of where to be and his positioning. It just feels so natural to him and fluid. And I agree with you. I think that if it's Redondo's role to be that player with a little bit more, technical ability and ability to get forward, but really to be that six that understands how to be in the right position at the right time. He didn't show it today or last night. It was a little bit of a mess, and I completely agree with this comment. He hustles, and you see him a lot, and he's working hard, and he's trying to win the ball, but he's not where he needs to be very often, I don't think.
And it's very simple. It's basic logic. You just need a body in that space to be able to defend it to some sort of, ability. It doesn't need to be perfect. Yes, you might get beat, but if you have a body there, it sort of stops that transition from flowing the way it's flowing, and then allows your defense to then get back in time. Of course, 100% agree with Freddie Diaz here. We have to give him some time. He's coming back from an injury, and I didn't think he should have started this game, let alone play the 90. That was really, really poor game management and player management from Tata. But I just wanted to make this particular point, because this doesn't necessarily equate to his injury or his form or his rhythm. It equates to something that, happens naturally as a player. So hopefully it gets better over time and evolves, but positioning is something that you have to be really cognizant of. And you mentioned Yannick Bright. He's played barely any minutes, and he's really, really good at it.
Yeah. It kind of reminds me of Diego Gomez last year, and they're stylistically different, but Diego Gomez came in and he was so eager to impress that he was sort of all over the field and kind of had this headless chicken vibe where he was sort of trying so hard to force turnovers, but then pulling himself out of position and then not being the effective player that he really could be and that we've seen this season. And I guess my question is it just a matter of like figuring it out for Redondo? And I do think it is, but Redondo has like a more important role than Diego Gomez does or did last season in terms of being the stopper and being the guy that holds the midfield together. And so he needs to figure out a little bit quicker than Diego Gomez got.
Fingers crossed he will. I trust him. I've always liked him as a player since I've seen him play the first 4 games for Inter Miami. So hopefully he can bring that back.
Yeah, and you can definitely see the talent for sure. My first award is the Spider-Man Award. And I just came up with this about 3 minutes ago.
With great power comes great responsibility. And I'm guessing the great power lies with Cello Wiegand, because we haven't given him an award in forever.
It is Cello Wiegand. Not because of what you said. That was like a shot from deep 3 that you just swished somehow. Game tying
Guys,
shot.
I'm an absolute day.
Congratulations for getting it right. Here's the thing about Spider-Man. He's like a kid that like goes to high school and stuff, and he's also like a superhero. And these are 2 separate worlds that he's living in. And I thought that Cello Wiegand got caught, especially in that second half, in 2 separate worlds where he's trying to get forward to be helpful in the attack to help them break down that low block, to help them get the goal or goals that they needed. And yet that was contributing to the problem of there being just acres of space going the other way. And part of the reason that our defense has become more solid is because he's decided to be more conservative about getting forward. I don't know if I really blame him, because we needed goals and he tried to get forward to be an outlet and to make an impact. He didn't really make an impact going forward, and I thought he kept us a little bit. He gave up a little bit of space going the other way. So I understand why he did it, but I think he was caught in these two different worlds of one being the normal player that he is, that is solid and that people like, and then this superhero that didn't quite come off and was a little awkward sometimes.
Yeah, I think one thing that's lacking about Wigan's game is his final third delivery, because if you're venturing out that far forward and you're exposing your back line and leaving the space in behind you, you want to be able to produce that result in the final third to justify being that far up. I think we saw it in a couple of games. The first two games that he played, he did a little bit better, but I haven't seen a lot of that. And when I was doing my research on Wigan when we signed him, he did a lot of that for Boca Juniors. He was actually really, really good in taking players on and putting the balls in the box. I do think it's a little bit of a disadvantage for him that the right side for me is a little lopsided, because Messi likes to play inside and then Gressel comes back up. And I don't think Gressel and Wigan complement each other too well. I don't know if that changes with Rojas, but we haven't seen Rojas play that position too often.
Can I ask you a question? Obviously, Julian Gressel started every single game, and when he first came, we were really excited to see what a Cello Wicket Lionel Messi combination might look like. And I agree with you. I don't think that it works particularly well when Gressel is also trying to occupy those same spaces. But if Gressel doesn't start this weekend, or if he doesn't start at some point in the future, do you still think that now that you've seen Cello a decent amount, do you still think that there's a potential to have like a spicy combo down that right side? Or do you think maybe that's not really the player Cello is, or at least not what he is for this team?
I do think he has a spiciness to his game that we haven't seen, and we may have actually killed it out of him. I'm sorry to say, we might have beaten the seal out too much, but he's a player who's been inculcated in the Argentinian style of football. He knows ball. He has a few flicks and passes in him. Again, I don't want to hype him up too much, but I would think with someone who knows how to play with overlapping wingers, because that's a completely different ball game in itself. You have to know when your fullbacks overlapping you, when to create space there, when to cut in, when to cut out, when to play with the fullback. I think if there's somebody that he can link up with well, I do think he'll be able to do that, because Jordi Alba and Robert Taylor do it really well on that side, because they understand each other really well. And Robert Taylor knows exactly how much to cut in to be able to allow Jordi Alba to, overlap him, when to do that, when not to do that. I think it's just a matter of some unbalance that we have on that right side of the pitch.
Yeah. And I had to go down my award list because I had to reshuffle things to make room for your GPS is broken award. So with that said, what is your second award for tonight?
I'm going to call this, Does This Come with Lumbar Support Award?
The lumbar spine, part of the spine, is crucial for flicking your hips back and forth, and that's what Luis Suarez didn't do well enough tonight, and that's why he needs more lumbar support for his back.
As much as I love your description of it, and it completely fits him completely fits him as well. No, that's not my reason. This award, does this come with the lumbar support award, goes to Julian Gressel, because right this minute, he needs to go to the furniture store, buy himself a nice, comfortable chair, and take a seat for the next at least 2 or 3 games, because boy, has he played so much. Talk about beating a seal into the ground. This player has been absolutely wrecked and destroyed in how many games he started. And I think we're taking out his love for football, man. Like, it's beyond hilarious at this point, because it's not like we don't have options. You plug in David Ruiz in there, allow Gressel to come in off the bench. It's going to do him so much good. Yes, he's underrated, SoFlo. I do think he's a good player, but we're not using him well enough, and I worry for him, man. I really do. I think he needs to be benched for a couple of games to regain some of his fitness, energy, match awareness, focus, everything.
He's played a lot. Listen, I'm looking at it now. Sergio Busquets has played more minutes than him. Tota Aviles has played more minutes than him. So it's not the minutes. It's just the consistency and the fact that we never get to see any other midfield trios. And I think, and again, I know I've said this a million times, but Gressel and Busquets playing in the midfield together just limits your possibilities so much. And so I just want to see something new. And I think you have to see something new this weekend. And listen, if we know Tata, he'll take out Redondo and put in Gressel, Kramaski or Ruiz. But I do think that giving Gressel a break would do good for him. And I also think he could be effective. Like, I think he could have been really effective in yesterday's game if he came in the last 20 minutes.
I agree. And for me, this award is less about the midfield and the structure and the player itself. It's more about protecting the player, because I think he's played so many minutes, obviously not more than Sergio Busquets, but there's a level when you're not having that level of impact, and when there's constantly other players outperforming you, it can really affect your game. And I feel like more than him fitting the midfield structure, I think he hasn't been able to find that role in the midfield where he can contribute something to this team, and that can affect you psychologically. So for me, I think coming off the bench for a couple of games might actually do him a world of good, because I do think he's a really good player.
Yeah, and we've had the Gressel conversation so many times that I don't know if it's really worth repeating. My last award is the Turnover Chain Award. Any guesses?
The Turnover Chain Award.
I don't know if you might not get the reference.
Obviously, and I mean obviously, this goes to the player who had the most successive turnovers in the midfield. Well, we've already covered all of them, and Sergio Busquets had a decent game. So not in the midfield, but in the final third. And I'm going to give it to Robert Taylor.
For those that aren't fans of American football, a couple years ago, the Miami Hurricanes came out with this new tradition where anytime a player in the defense had a turnover, an interception, or a fumble recovery, they got to wear this turnover chain on the sideline, take a picture with it, and it was really fun. And I think that was in the Mark Richt era, but I think they kept it for a while. They might still do it, honestly. So this is the defender that did the right thing. And to me, the defender that did the right thing was also the guy I would have given man of the match to, who's been harassed, criticized, given the most underrated player, I think, and had a great game last night. And I really would challenge anyone who thinks he didn't to go back and watch the tape, because I thought he was the best player for Inter Miami, and that is Sergei Kristoff. He had, let me just pull the stats up. 5 clearances, 3 block shots, 6 interceptions, a tackle. He had a really nice one-on-one stop, last man stop in, I think, the 18th minute. And I thought he was really good in this game. Yeah, no, sorry, the 37th minute on Lobjanidze. He had a nice last man tackle. I thought he was really good in this game. I don't think any of the goals were his fault, and he got a lot of criticism, and the defense got a lot of criticism. And I thought that they played fine, and Kristoff in particular, I thought was our best defender. So
I saw a lot of criticism for Toto Aviles. I didn't see too much for Kristoff, but I watched the game. knowing that the defense has been absolutely annihilated, but like online, and has been criticized a lot. I thought they were perfectly fine. I don't think they did anything, too wrong. Yes, they weren't great, but
the only exception I think to that was the fullbacks, maybe Jordi Alba a little bit, but the center backs I thought were fine.
yeah.
I mean,
And the
Aviles
reason
got
that
a
we
little aggressive, but
Yeah, just a little bit. The reason that we didn't concede in the first 43, 44 minutes is because, as you mentioned, Christoph and Aviles were having good recovery runs. There was, I think, in the 26th minute, or you may have already mentioned it, but there was an instance where we were completely overwhelmed on transition, and I thought that Atlanta would eventually score, but our defenders got back in position, and when they get back in position, they know how to do a job. And I think it's harsh to criticize players for stuff that they're not going to be good at. Christoph has never been good at transitions. Aviles is getting better at transitions, but that's just not a positive side to their game. It's just a reality of fact. So when you don't set them up for success, you can't expect them to perform to the ultimate level. And I still think Sergei Christoph had a fantastic game, and I completely agree with you. He didn't stand out to me as a player who did anything wrong or put a wrong foot. In fact, the scoreline might have been worse if he didn't perform to the levels that he did. So, yeah, I agree with you on this.
yeah, and going through the goals, that first goal, Christoph picked up Chare in the middle, and so it should have been Tota Aviles that steps up into Lojanice to make that shot more difficult. In the second goal, Christoph is covering for Jordi Alba as Alba's scrambling back from the attack, and it was Alba that didn't step up to make a play. And then the third goal was just a nice play from Atlanta, nothing the back line could have done. But and we were sort of toast by that point anyway. So yeah, and you must have missed it, but I saw a lot of people, and maybe this was more MLS people than Inter Miami people, that were looking at this game and just criticizing, a lot of criticism for Calendar, but also a lot of criticism for these defenders. Even in the chat, we saw how we need to go get a central defender, which I'm not opposed to, but this game wasn't the example where we need to go get a new central defender, I didn't think.
I will say this, though. When we put up the graphic on Twitter about the awards and people read turnover chain, if they don't get the reference, it's going to look like we criticize, say, Christoph for too many turnovers. So we might have actually fed into the criticism there. But
listen, if anyone's getting the turnover chain for too many turnovers, it would be the player we would get criticism for giving it to, like Messi or Alba or Suárez. Okay, so those are our 6 awards. We've got the GPS is broken, which is, I think, our best award we've ever given out. Anyone else that you think deserves to be talked about? Drake Calendar, Busquets, Suárez, Matías Rojas.
Suárez for sure. I had an award for him. I think he looked. I had the junkyard scrap award for him because he looked a little bit rusty. Not his best game. And the only, I think, it's not a downside, but Suárez is the kind of player that even if he's not having a good game, you can't really take him off because he can score at any time. And that's a shame for someone like Campana who's sitting on the bench, because he can have an impact when he comes on. So the only way that Campana would potentially come on if Luis Suarez comes off is if he's having an absolute terrible time or if he's injured. Otherwise, we're going to see those two together. So just wanted to mention Suarez didn't have a great game. Drake Calendar, I know we've talked about him potentially saving a couple of goals. I don't think that was the case. I thought Robert Taylor didn't have a great game either. The entire front line wasn't the best. Matías Rojas looked sharp when he came on, but couldn't have the level of impact that we would have wanted. So
yeah, just for Drake Calendar, he had 5 saves from inside the box. Like, he had a good game despite the fact that he gave up 3 goals. That we conceded 3, and it's not his fault that he's not Keylor Navas, but Suarez. It's a shame Suarez is going to the Copa America, because I saw in the chat earlier someone mentioned a 4-4-2. I would have really liked to see, when Messi was gone, Suarez and Campana playing as the front 2 in a 4-4-2. I thought that could be really interesting, but obviously that's not going to happen. Robert Taylor, I didn't think was as bad as I guess you did. Yeah, I'm just looking at the team sheet. Campana came on. He only got 4 touches in 22 minutes, and I thought that was sort of a sign of how disjointed we were and sort of gassed we were by the end. We weren't even able to sort of put balls in. So I don't think there was a lot Campana could have done. And there was a moment, though, I will say, where they have a transition opportunity, and we have Cello, Christoph, and Avila's back there, and the next closest player on our team was Leo Campana, tracking all the way back from the striker position to try and help out defensively, which I get. He's a sub and he came on late, but still, I think that was like emblematic of our struggle with closing down spaces and getting back in transition. Okay. Anything else about this game, or should we just talk about this weekend's game against St. Louis?
It's hopefully a blip on the great journey that we've been on in the last couple of or few weeks with Inter Miami. And these things happen. Listen, this is the MLS. We were bound to have one of those games where everyone dropped a stinker. So now that's out of the way. We can get back to winning ways over the weekend. And first target is St. Louis.
Yeah, the most predictable thing in the MLS is that good teams lose to bad teams, and should have known. Cincinnati also lost to Nashville, who's not a great team, and so we keep our lead at the top of the table, still first in the East, still on 34 points, but still one ahead of Cincinnati, and so yeah, gotta feel decent about that. We play St. Louis this weekend. We played them last year, but it is a Western Conference foe that we don't see a ton of, and we don't have a ton of common opponents with. So we will do our research, and we will be back for a pregame show 1 hour before kickoff. That one also might be a little interesting just because we have some scheduling concerns. But we will be on for the hour and answering questions and talking about the game and getting everyone excited for what is hopefully 3 more points for Inter Miami. Anything before we sign off, man?
Let's get back to winning ways. I really like this quote. Bad losses help teams to get back on track. So there you go. Let's hope we get back on track this weekend.
Yes. Thank you for the wise words, Francisco. And everyone, we will see you on Saturday. I hope you have a wonderful night. And let's put this one in the rearview mirror.